Hello, my name is Alan. Welcome to my channel. This video is going to take us through the various stages of painting some ancient figures, in this particular case Etruscan hoplite heavy infantry types, from the base undercoat stage to the finished article. I'm going to be splitting the video into two, one focusing on the figures themselves, the other on painting of the shield designs. Here I'm going to just show you a couple of figures that you can see in front of you with the black undercoat applied, and we're going to begin the painting process. Again, just to stress, this is the way that I paint the figures. If there's anything in here that you find interesting, then that's absolutely fine, and it'd be great if you could take some of these techniques on board. However, if it's not your thing and you're painting them a different way, that's perfectly fine. I just thought I'd show you, my approach, and as I say, if you can learn anything from that, you're very welcome. The most important point to note here is we're going to paint the figures inside out. So effectively that means we're going to start with the flesh. We're going to work outwards from the figure so that we try and avoid as much as possible conflicting with ourselves in terms of brushing over a colour that we've just applied, by trying to get into that detail that's actually inside the recesses of the figure. So by painting the face first and the arms and the legs in this particular case, what we're going to do is make sure that when we paint the colours on top, we minimise the risk of painting over. So for me, inside out painting, as I describe it, beginning with the flesh, and for me this is a Foundry 5A base coat. That Foundry do a variety of colours, and in fact a number of different flesh tones, and I just use the standard palette, if you like, which is the 5 series, so 5A, B and C. They do an Oriental flesh, they do a Mediterranean flesh, and there's a good argument for saying that we should have done that in this particular case. The reason I'm sticking with the 5A is that the other miniatures in the army have already been painted using this scheme. I think if I had my time again, I may be interested in using that slightly darker colour. If you don't like the finish that this gives you, plenty of people use a brown, a tan underneath the first coat, just to give you that greater depth for the flesh tones. I've always found this to be quite adequate, is perhaps an understatement, but I found it to be quite useful and quite good at giving you that the finish that I'm after. So what I'm doing here, and hopefully you can see, it's a little bit awkward because I've got the figure in front of me rather than close to me, if that makes sense, because I'm trying to do this in front of the camera. But it's a very basic process. All we're trying to do really is put this initial covering on, and I think you'll find once we do that, the actual video quality will improve, because it will start to render the figure properly without struggling to focus. This can look a little bit thin at times, and you'll notice we've got a bit of a thing going on there. That's fine. I'm not too worried if I do go over a line. Obviously it's best not to do that, but if that happens, it happens. By choosing to go inside out, there's a greater chance that we'll overpaint an error as part of the process of finishing the figure, and at least that way you're not painting things too many times. Just a matter of interest, Greeks, and I include in that those influenced by Greeks. These greaves that I'm just painting around at the moment were not strapped on or anything like that. They were sprung on. So the elasticity or the tension of the greaves on the actual leg was sufficient to hold them in place. and presumably a lot nicer that way than attempting to have straps or anything similar, silly like that, which under combat conditions and heat would have been pretty uncomfortable. What I tend to do here is just line in on the sandals. Just make sure we get the general impression of skin underneath the sandals, and in this particular case, that's that base coat done. If you spot any lines, go back to them. Any areas that you think you should have filled in, but that's fine. Okay, you can see that it's a little bit pale there in terms of coverage on the face, but I'm happy with that. Let's move that to one side. Repeat the process for this figure. So what I've chosen here, just by way of an example, is a figure on the left with a spear, and the figure that we're now tackling has got one of the sort of crafted pilum type weapons that I showed you how I make them on my earlier video. Just a quick word to people who've been watching my videos. It's it's very nice of you that you have watched them, and B, it's great to hear some comments from you about what you'd like to see and what you'd like me to cover. Please don't think that I have any sort of ego about painting. I think it's absolutely the sort of thing that you should tackle yourselves and learn what you like and what you don't like, and what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And although it can be quite difficult at times, just be prepared to find your own way in terms of the end result. And I say it can be difficult, and because it's sometimes a little bit hard to translate the work that you're doing in terms of base coating and preparing from that final finish. All I would say is I've been painting a long time, my style changes all the time, and the figures that I produce now, I think, reflect years of perhaps doing it wrong in many cases, and just learning the lessons and techniques that work for me as an individual painter. And it's not about following a set format, it's about finding your own way. And just absorb some techniques and tactics and useful hints and tips from a variety of sources to get the job done. So I'm going to carry on and paint the rest of the group in a similar style. Excuse me on that one. Fill that figure in there. And when we return, I'll show you the next stage. Thanks. Welcome back. As you can see, I've finished painting the base coat, the flesh, or the initial coat. And just a reminder, this is the Foundry Triad that we're using. What I've done is pulled two figures out here because the next stage is to paint the eyes. Now, I used to paint the eyes pretty much last stage, if you like, of figure painting, but I've become convinced lately that the best way to do it is to paint them now when you've done the first base flesh colour. By painting the eyes now, when we come in to put the next the middle coat, if you like, of the flesh on, if we have got any untidiness, it's a much easier sort of time to tidy it up. I'm going to use a little bit of off-white. This is Vallejo off-white. I either use white, pure white or off-white. This happened to be the first one that came to hand, so I'm going to use that this time. They're pretty close in that we're not going to notice much difference, to be brutally frank. But what we're trying to do is put a little dot in here where the figure's eyes should be, and then we're just going to put that white thing, white base colour in to begin with. Then we're just going to come back a bit later and put the little black dot in. Because we're going to put a black dot in, we're going to try and put a sensible amount of white paint there. Now I'm using here a 3-0 brush. I don't normally do that, to be honest, so I'm going to give this one a go as well, which I've got here, which is, I think, just a detail brush. This is an older brush that I've got. It's really about the point, not about the size of the brush, and as long as you can get a good point and effectively dot in there, that's all we're trying to do. Now the other thing I'm going to use is this visor attachment here, and as you can see, maybe that just makes the figure magnification a little bit more noticeable. Now I've got to the age where I have to use one of these to get the eyes. I've tried without them, and it's just really annoying to try and get one to get a finish that you're happy with. And I'm going to try and do that on camera and also hold the figure at the same time so you can see what's going on. And just a reminder, if your paint gums up a little bit, just take an old, there we go. Now I'm a little bit concerned by how watery that is, so I'm going to give that a shake again. We do not want watery paint for this process. We want something that will not run in the eye, if that makes sense. We're going to try and find the correct position and then just dot in it. So I want a, as I say, not exactly a sticky paint. Do you know what? I'm not happy with that. And because I'm not happy with that, I'm going to take another couple of paints here, the Vallejo Pure White, and just see what this finish is like. Okay, I can already tell there. Now that, oops, I don't know if you can see on camera, but we've got a small amount just in the middle there that is definitely more sticky, as it were. So when we come in to paint this figure, what we're trying to do is just dot in the eye there. Hopefully you could see that even though I was on camera. Let's try the smaller brush. Oops. Now I've gone a little bit too wide there, as you can see, but we'll carry on. We'll do another couple whilst we're on camera. Okay. Okay. Just a couple more, just to give you the general gist. I don't know if you can see, but that paintbrush there is not potentially playing the game, because it's starting to widen out. Okay, and to be honest, we only need to create the general impression. This is still quite a small scale figure in the general scheme of things, and we don't want to create it to look too white. Oops. So I've made an error there, so we're going to go back and fix that one. If I make an error, I tend to pull the figure out, and I know that I've got to go back and revisit it. must admit, I normally use a broken toed paintbrush, and I normally use a 00. There we go. That's better. That's the sort of size that we want. We don't want to make this too obvious, but as I said, don't worry about making perhaps a slightly larger white section than you intended, because we can deal with that later. So I'm going to carry on finishing those off, and then I'll be back to show you the next stage. Okay, we're back. Just thought I'd say I've reverted to my broken toed, which is actually a 0, and this point works a lot better. I've also brought myself a little bit further forward in terms of when I see the figure, so hopefully it won't look quite so silly now when I'm putting the little black dots in the eyes. Again, we try not to use too runny a paint here because it won't work, but this one can be a little bit more forgiving. Just to reiterate, what we're doing here is we're taking a figure and we're trying to put a little dot roughly in the position where the eye should be. Now, I don't know why, but I was told once that you dot the right eye first, then the left eye. And I think if you're right-handed, that allows you to see the position of the eye and make sure that you're not doing eyes this side and this side, which would look silly, or you're not doing eyes that are too sort of focused and mad looking. What you'll also find is in certain times the eye will sort of have a kind of natural sighting that you'll find and you'll spot. So we're just going to put a little dot over here, a little dot over here. First I'll prime the brush, and then hopefully you can see this. Little dot there, little dot there. Now, doesn't maybe not look too great on the camera, but believe me, that will make a big difference when we finish off the rest of the painting. Just take one of these other figures here. And if you've done what I've done there and put it to one side, make sure when you do over here that you put it in the same sort of quadrant, because at least that way the guy looks like he's actually half sensible. Just a word on figures that have helmets. If the helmet is too small for you to get into, you don't need to worry about this because no one will ever see it. No one will ever notice. Now there you can see quite a lot of white still. Now I'm not bothered by that because I know that I'm going to go in and finish that off in a moment. Let's see if we can actually make sure the camera focuses. Oh, and again, I've just gone on the cheek there. Not worried. We'll come back and we'll fix that in. So there are some here that are probably on the verge of I'm not going to bother to put much in the way of a black dot in. I've put a little bit of white in this one, so I will persevere. The most effective, if you can, is to try and put the dot in the middle of the eye, but not so sort of central that the figure looks crazy. What we're trying to do is get the right sort of proportion in terms of eye colour being black versus the white surround. So basically a small black dot with a big piece of white is going to look a bit silly. And all I would say is if you put the eye in and you don't like the finish, it's really easy at this stage just to paint it out, put some of the flesh back in, and you won't end up regretting your decision. There we go, do that one. Hopefully at least some of these are going to come out on the video in focus so that you can see what we're about. There we go. Let me just revisit this one a little bit. Okay, yeah. So hopefully you can see that. Let's come back and let's do this one. apologies, it's actually really hard for me to see the figure and the camera at this stage. Let's see if I can force it into focus. But I'm sure you get the general gist of it. And as I said, more than anything, just want people to be aware that, you know, painting can be a little bit forgiving as well. It may seem madness that we're dotting the I's here. Oh, there's one that I missed. Let's put some white in that one. Here we go. But for me, it's the little touches like this that makes the figure realistic. And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to achieve. I don't think I tend to hold the figures like this and balance the brush against the figure, so it's not actually as difficult as it might first seem. And again, just a little bit of practice, and I'm sure you'll be fine. And if you can't cope with it, that's absolutely fine. Just don't paint eyes on your figures. Basically, some people put a dark wash in, and that actually recesses into the eyes, and you can achieve a really good result that way as well. As I said, for me, I started painting eyes a number of years ago, and now when I try not, if I were to leave them out, I think I'd be concerned that it wasn't realistic looking enough figure. So I'll carry on doing the rest of them, and we'll come back to the next stage. Thanks. Hi, I'm trying to hold the figure so that you guys get a better look at the facial features. Hopefully you can see there that we've got the two little eyes, and we've got obviously the black still coating on the hair or the beard, but the black undercoat does not work great with the autofocus. There you can see the eyes, and that's the sort of effect that we're trying to go for. So what I'm going to do now is move on to the next stage, which for me is just getting the base coat flesh out again, and just making sure that we've got good coverage on all of the features. And on a couple of the figures, when you get up really close, I've spotted that there are sections that we didn't actually, or I didn't actually tackle correctly the first time around. So this is just going to be a little bit of a tidy up now. So we're just going to revisit the paints, which I'll just grab, and I shall come back in a moment. Okay, so I'm just going to return to my foundry paint, go through each one of the figures in turn, start with the guys at the back, just look at them. What we're trying to do here, like on this figure here, not sure whether it's obvious on via the camera, but we've got a little bit of white that's gone inside that sort of nose area. Ooh. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of the paint and just take that out, and we've got a little bit on the cheek there. Just do that the same. Probably a good idea to have a little bit of a production line going on here. I'm going to deal with this figure somewhat separately. This figure here has got a bit of a sort of blurring, if you like, or a join there on the actual helmet. So I've decided what I'm going to do with that one is get a small drill and remove that join so that we can redo the eye. So I'm going to put that one to one side, pick up all of these in turn. That's good enough, that one. It's a good idea to have a bit of a sort of plan of action, as it were, with keeping them separated out. I'm not looking to lose that sort of dark effect from the black undercoat. I'm just trying to find bits that have genuinely not been covered with paint at all. So this is a bit of a mess here. So just to clean this one up, I'm going to put a line in there. As you can see, but the paintbrush is starting to separate there. We don't want that. Let's readdress this one with a wipe on the tissue. And we'll reform the point. And we'll go again. Okay, so I'm going to carry on doing that to the rest of this group, and I'll come back and show you what I've done for that figure over there. But see you shortly. Hello, welcome back. I'm going to move on to the next stage. What we're going to do is we're going to take this figure and we're going to try and apply the second coat in the triad. This is a Foundry 5B flesh. And what we're trying to do is pick out all of the raised parts on the face. I'm going to try and get this in focus and paint at the same time so that you get the gist. And then when we come to the hands, what we're going to try and do is run the brush along the fingers to create some definition. So I'm going to load up the brush. And just start to, as I say, pick out those raised pieces. Hopefully that the camera will focus in a little bit more. But you should see the effect that we're creating. Up close, that's actually quite a distinct differentiation that we're creating there. Let's move on to do the face. What I'm doing here is just picking out the nose to begin with, going along the top here. Oops. Trying to get in at the cheekbones and the side of the nose, but making sure we leave plenty of the undercoat underneath. And then I'm just going to take this lip area and just gently apply a bit of lightness to it, so that we start to pick out the features of the face there. And you don't have to do a great deal before the combination of the highlight that you're giving the face and the eyes start to really make that look like a person's face. So let's go and do these hands here. So let's make sure we get the brush loaded properly. Now, hands are one of those things that each painter tackles differently. Some people almost like to dry brush across this way. I tend to find it easier going across and actually following the line of the finger. Again, it's a personal choice thing. Just do a little bit of practice yourself and work out what you find easiest. And then what I do with the remainder is I tend to kind of like exaggerate the musculature of the arm. By making sure that I leave plenty of lines to give that impression of the muscle in the arm and the sort of general position. Now, apologies if you're struggling to follow this. I'm going to get rid of this clip and try and show you again. So on the top here, just go across the knuckles with a bit of paint, bring that down, stop short of where the wrist area is. This one we can afford to be a little bit casual about because this is the shield arm, so we're going to stick a big shield on here. But you'll get the general gist of, if you leave a little bit of a line in there, especially around the bicep, you'll create a realistic looking muscular sort of definition that will not look too unnatural or too stark, but will just give you that general impression when it's viewed on the tabletop. Really, it's a question I find of following what makes sense when you look at the figure, and obviously trying to go for the high point of the arm. And I always put a little dot on the elbow, and we'll probably come back to some of these areas with a third coat, the highlight. But for now, what we're trying to do is just get the definition of the flesh and of the, if you like, the unclothed part of the figure. And make sure that we give ourselves a really good guide when we come to putting the clothing colours together. Okay, then again, what I do with the figure's legs is a similar kind of thing. Let's highlight the knee, a line across the top, line across the top there. I've always done the sort of shin area like that, and again just leave a little bit of a gap each side. Start off with a bigger gap perhaps, and then close it up. Oop. Okay, and again we're going for something that looks sensible when the figure's on the tabletop. And hopefully you get the general gist of what I'm doing here. Painting figures with a lot of flesh is always a little bit more challenging, whereas if you have a figure with trousers or something similar, you tend to get the folds of the cloth that the sculpture has put on the figure that are much easier to follow in terms of highlighting. And again, you can tackle this differently if you want. in terms of how you define the skin. Some painters, you know, will just paint a flesh colour, a lighter colour, and then put a wash over. I've done that on certain figures and it can work effectively. But what I'm doing here is painting this in the same style as the rest of the army, and this is how I did those. There again, I've actually just drawn lightly across the toes to highlight those. That's a different technique that you could use on hands for the fingers. And just make sure we go round fleshy parts of the figure. Put a little line through there. Make sure the back of the calf gets a good raised portion put on it. And there we go. Pretty happy with that. Don't know what that looks like on the old video. It's been a bit of a challenge trying to paint with the camera in the way. Again, really don't let this put you off. And because we're going to that inner bit first, if I go over the helmet, you know, if I accidentally did a line like this, well, obviously in this case I could wipe it off. But you know what? We're not going to worry about that, because if I wanted to repair that, I could just get a bit of the black, go over it again, or I can just wait till I paint the gold, because it will go. But there you go. There's the figure. We've maybe got a little bit of the finger area just to sort out here. So that's the sort of approach I take to painting the flesh areas. I'm now going to repeat that to make sure I get that. I'm now going to repeat that for all of the other figures in the group and come back and show you what that looks like.